Hello, good people of the internet. My name is Andy, and you're watching Geek Curio. And on today's show, we have a very good friend, Notepad. So, Notepad, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Nice to be on the show finally. Nice to get interviewed by someone,
Yeah.
mostly someone as popular as you are.
Oh,
So
I wouldn't say I'm that popular, but thank
doing
you
better
very.
than me.
Well, hopefully, I'll be on the up at least, anyway.
Exactly.
So, I will admit this is the first time I've interviewed a VTuber. I absolutely love your avatar. Very,
I
very iconic. We were discussing this beforehand. But no, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to doing this interview.
I am too, and the V Sona, as I've referred to it as, started entirely as a joke, and it's just continued. It's gone too far, but I can't stop now.
Yeah, the horse has definitely bolted, hasn't it?
Yeah,
It is.
yeah,
um,
I'm too far in.
yeah, definitely. You don't want to pull out now, anyway. Definitely not. Um, anyway, so we are here to talk about RPGs, tabletop RPGs, and your love of them. And mainly, I just want to know, how did you get into RPGs and TTRPGs in the first place?
My first experience with it, and this is going to sound a little bit odd, but back in high school, I was in there. One of my friends' dad ran a D&D game, just a little one for me, him, and a few of our other friends. And we're like, oh, this sounds like fun. This was 2015, about.
Right.
So we played, we had fun, and his dad, who I've known for a while, he's just like, hey, you're a really good player. Why don't you join my main group? With his son and a few of the other older guys. I'm like, yes, I will, because I know what I'm doing, because I poured over the rule book 15 times trying to get it to I must know. But that kind of sparked that love of things. And that group was older guys who've been playing games for a very long time, and they introduced me to a bunch of stuff. Because I didn't start with D&D proper. I started with Castles and Crusades.
All right.
And then one of them introduced me to my favorite game of all time, which is Rifts, which Rifts is a game, and it is a terrifying game, but I love it to death because of it.
Tell me
But
why is it terrifying?
Rifts has been coming out since about the 80s,
Right.
and it is such a massive undertaking by a company called Palladium, mostly one man named Kevin Sabeta, who is insane. And he has expanded this world so huge. It's a D100, D20 system about this. Rift's Earth is this massive setting that has everything you could think about it in it. There's different damage types, there's 1,000 rules, there's a million things you can do in that game. And when I was introduced to it, I was really overwhelmed by it, but I was given all of these options. And that was that first moment when it was like, okay, tell me what you want to do. Here's all these books, here's all these options. And I read through all of them because I'm like, I got to figure out. I'm having a ball. And then it was just like, well, we need to make something here. So I started writing little games, and then I roped my friends into playing some, which we only had 2 hours most of
Mm-hmm.
the time back in where I was. I'm from the Midwest of the US. The satanic panic never left there. I actually got accused of trying to spread witchcraft to my friend because his mother didn't understand it. You will never have to experience the absolute pain of having to go up to the guidance counselor of the school and trying to explain to her that you're doing good Christian gaming and it's totally fine and you're not trying to spread Satanism to her son.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's people just don't understand it. And out there being such a small group of people who kind of understood that you begin trying to improvise, you make new things. People were like, here's this new game I made, or here's this, and we had to make it because we couldn't play D&D.
Mm-hmm.
None of us had the books. We had a phone with a dice app on it and a dream.
Aw.
So I made my own, and that was kind of the start of the game dev journey. Not as impressive, but the Notepad thing proper started about 2 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Because someone wanted to fix the old Green Ronin, A Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game.
Yeah.
which is broke, by the way. Beautifully broken game.
Yeah, I've heard there's quite a few of the big franchises out there which are broken and never fixed, never to be fixed.
The Chronicle system's interesting. It just has a lot of little weird quirks to it that you look deeper into. You're like, oh, I've made Gregor Clegane, but stronger and a gorilla. It's like, okay, cool. This is the intent.
Yeah.
I fixed that up. It was like it's like a 250-page book that I wrote just by hand by myself.
Whoa.
Just because people wanted it, and I was getting feedback from the group and this thread on 4chan of all things. Actually, don't go there, kids. And we helped it, and I made this thing, Blood, Coin, and Steel, probably one of my biggest works and probably one of my most proud, just because I put a lot of effort into it, and I added everything that they said they were going to but never did. Added a bunch of side things, made it's different. And that kind of lit the metaphorical spark in the soul of like, I actually really enjoy doing this as just me having fun. And then it kind of spiraled rapidly out of control. And now I have like 40 projects.
40 projects.
Yeah.
But you are still having fun with it though, isn't it? You are making your passion, your hobby, and
I make games like the Sprug Workshop. The thing that I kind of go under is the single-purpose role-playing unitary games, or Bizarro GURPS. And I make games that either aren't really seen, have like a weird pitch, or I'm like, I just want to see if this works. Can I make a game replicating whatever? Or can I make a game? Let me open up my little folder here with all the crap that I have. Like, can I make a fighting game about punching people in the face really hard and make that really kinetic feeling for like Fist of Chaos?
Yeah.
Then here I am, a guy who writes games for fun, and that's my game design journey. Me looking into weird stuff is a relatively recent endeavor, because there's a lot of weird stuff out there.
There is. Speaking of weird stuff, before we started the interview, you mentioned you've seen some really weird RPGs out there. What would you say, in your opinion, what would you say, in your opinion, is probably the weirdest one that you've come across? Don't hold back as well. So.
The absolute strangest ones, the absolute ones that kind of throw me for a loop. There's a few of them, like good wise was like thing that I actively enjoy, that is beautiful and wonderful and plays moi. That is, I'm gonna get yelled at for this. It's a game called Chronica.
Okay.
And Chronica is written. It's a Japanese tabletop role-playing game by a man named Ryo Kamiya, and he is an auteur. He does really weird games for really weird reasons. Chronica is entirely fan translated, and it's about being undead people after the end of the world, and kind of trying to survive that very post-apocalyptic sense of things. But the combat is really brutal because, hey, I got my arm ripped off.
Yeah.
But I'm a zombie, so I don't really care. And the system and kind of blends itself together where it's like, yeah, I am going a little bit nuts, but I'm also fighting this huge monster, and I have a chainsaw hand because I'm an undead abomination of God. It gives you that really weird sense where you're looking at it, you're like, I am playing a undead, battle warrior currently fighting a giant soul dozer on this ridiculous map. It has all the different action points. It feels great. I've played it once. I had a ball with it. Like, way more fun than you think for the pitch. And I was like, I love this game and I want more people to know about it, but it's very weird, so people don't usually look at it that much.
Well, like you said, it's fan translated, so obviously things could potentially be lost in translation.
Oh yeah,
But yeah,
that.
I think some of the things you said, some of the best things out there is not necessarily in English.
Yeah, we see here in the States and probably the UK as well, we don't see a lot of games that get translated over, mostly in like the Japanese sphere. There's
Mhm.
a lot of really cool stuff out there, but we don't see it. Like, you have things like Golden Sky Stories, which is about being in a Ghibli movie. Combat in that game is shoving someone over and having them cry. Uh, you have things like Kamagakure, which is this insane anime battle thing. Shinobigami, which is entirely about anime ninja battles, but the entire game is competitive. You're
Mhm.
expected to PvP, and it works. You have all these games, some of them get translated. Those ones actually got officially translated. Most don't. And there is
Yeah.
like a dedicated fan translation community trying to find these. But like out there, out east, they don't do PDFs. It's all physical books, which is
Yeah.
very difficult. And then in like Eastern Europe, you have like publisher wars going on where it's like, oh, well, this company can publish this thing, but they don't want to publish it to make sure that this company can't publish their thing. It's really fascinating. And I wish we would see more of these games out there. I wish we could see more of these cool ideas that other people are having, but we also have to deal with well, one little word, one little letter,
Mhm.
D&D here in the States, and everything has to compete with that, and nothing ever wins.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I also often find that the RPGs that we have tend to reflect historical culture. Hence the reason why we get so much what to us is probably weird stuff coming out of Japan because we probably don't
Mhm.
share similar. D&D fantasy stuff is based on medieval Europe, plus their folklore and things that they feared. Whereas, give an example of a weird thing coming out of Japan. I do a Tuesday night stream with a good friend of mine, and we decided to stream Final Fight, which is a
Mhm.
fantastic game. I couldn't believe I was only 10 when it came out, which is how old it is. But we finished it with like an hour left to go on the show, and so we thought we'd pick something else from the Capcom beat 'em up package that we had. And we'd never seen this game before. We picked up a game called Battle Circuit, and I swear it was the weirdest video game I've ever played. Um, it's a beat 'em up. My friend played a pink ostrich ridden by a schoolgirl,
Sounds about
and
right.
I was a plant.
Yeah,
So
no, there's some weird stuff out there, and it's a shame that we sometimes don't see it.
yeah,
And that's why I kind of started the Curious Case in a few ways, just to introduce people to things that they may not ever see or maybe not ever even heard about, because
yeah,
it's niche, it's small. The RPG industry isn't like board games or video games. It's a lot smaller than people think.
hmm hmm
And being a sad little developer here, let me just drink my whiskey as I cry into my coffee. It's not easy.
no, I think it's wonderful that we're, you know, the the fact that nowadays we are able to expose ourselves to other countries' cultures, other
Mhm.
countries. Um, sorry, my dog is trying to jump up on me. He's just gonna have to get ear rubs now. So, um, yeah, just being able to get exposure to other countries' RPGs and what they have for fun. I mean, the interesting thing with the Japanese stuff, does it use dice? Because I know Japanese tend to use a lot of tokens or cards and stuff like that.
Ye-
So,
a lot do. Like, the one thing about Japanese, and I have to get this right, or the people in one of my other JTRPG servers will get mad at me,
hmm
is Japanese games were built up back in the day, but it was things like BattleTech, the old BattleTech RPG,
yeah,
and the old Call of Cthulhu games.
hmm
All of those relied really heavily on modules and like very module play because people didn't have time. Dice were also incredibly expensive getting into it because they were technically not labeled as like toys, they were labeled as gambling.
yes,
So they had the upmark. So like to buy a D20 there, it would be like $10, $15 more for just a single dice. So People couldn't justify that.
No.
So, but you could get a D6 easy. You can get a D6 anywhere.
Yeah.
So the industry kind of shifted over to that like heavily D6, very narrative but very one-shot oriented play. Like a lot of the games I talked about earlier, you can play all of them in one session and be done with it. You have a very front-loaded character creation because you may only have an afternoon, 3-4 hours every couple weeks, and you may not meet again for a while because you have to go to like the karaoke bar. If the karaoke bar doesn't have an open room, you kind of have to wing it and hope for the best. It's very different the way they play, and their games have shifted over to that philosophy, which is kind of what we're seeing here a little bit, where we saw with back in about 2010-ish, which was the narrative game revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Apocalypse World, things like Blades in the Dark. We shifted over to this much more narrative play over here, which is a lot easier to do online.
Yes.
Rather than battle mats and all that. But that's where things like Roll20 came in, where you could play those games online a lot easier. But it's it's interesting to see how and why certain different places with different situations, how their game industry develops. Like in Brazil, for example, I'll get my Brazilian boys or something. They have some big games down there, but the idea was they were pretty much, a lot of them were like these kind of not quite knockoffs, but very different, very similar to other products here in the States, because I could read English, so I can get this game and I could make it my own. So a lot of them did. And you have a very interesting industry down there of very few games that are very mimicked elsewhere, and they do their own thing. It's very interesting. And I've been bullying one of them to try to like give me your games, and he's only sent me like 4 or 5 of them. I'll bully him after this too. But I find it fascinating. You see a lot of these things that we just can't find elsewhere. You can't really like just go on Google being like, yes, bring me to the Japanese game store, please. It's like, yeah, here's the $90 book to import. It's like,
and by the way, you need to translate it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting you mentioned Brazilian game, because a good friend of mine, Carlos, is Brazilian. He actually lives here in Europe. But he works on a lot of game supplement stuff, so you probably have walked in the same circles as him, Carlos Berlitz.
If you ever get curious, ask him about 3D&T.
3D&T.
Yeah, that was a big one. Tormenta actually got an English release not too long ago. And like some of those games, because it was such a niche industry down there, and a few guys translated what they could and made their own stuff with it. And it was like, this is really fascinating. No, Spain actually has a very fascinating industry. Like
Yeah,
they have
I do a lot of painting, and they didn't realize that the majority of all the painting stuff seems to be originating from Spain, which is mad.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of stuff down there that you don't think of. You're not like, yes, Spain. Like, no, you don't automatically go to Spain, but they have a few. There's one company, Nostrodem. I don't speak Spanish. Apologies. They have a bunch of really cool stuff. They're actually aimed at kids. Actually, a lot of games aimed at younger audiences, which is kind of a weird thing we don't see a lot of. There's like one big game that does that.
Yeah.
On drive-through, and it's Hero Kids, which is a racket. I swear, God, those guys make so much money. But it's very, very fascinating. All across the world, we see these different games, board games, board games, war games, RPGs that we kind of get in our own little circles. If you were to ask people like, what's your favorite war game? And a lot of them will be like, I guess I like Warhammer.
Yeah.
But like, there's so many different ones. There's all the Osprey ones. There's all of the Napoleonics. There's all these older ones. It's like so many options. I want to introduce everyone to them.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a little bit about the. Obviously, you build your own systems as well, and you said you've got 40 projects going on at the moment. On your Twitter, you say you're available for commission work.
Yes.
What sort of what sort of stuff are you producing for people at the moment?
I make things that either the people TM want,
Hmm.
which are usually just odd games that we don't see, or it's games that have just kind of hits my interest at that time. Like I have an entire document called Things Notepad Wants to Do. I share it everywhere. I mean, like if you have any ideas, always tell me about it. But it's like, hey, how do you make a game like Arma and like Action Squad Combat Evolved Aces, I called it. And it's like, well, how do you make a modern military game with all the modern military stuff in it? I'm like, all right, I'll add it to the list and see what I can do with it.
Hmm.
But like currently I end up with things like people ask, where was a really odd one? Let's see. Usually it's games based on franchises that don't get any love. There's a 2018 anime called Grand Belm that people were like, I want this. And I'm like, all right, I can write it. I had this a revelation in the middle of the night. I'm like, I know how to do it. It's a mech game. I wrote it. It's there. You can play it.
Hmm.
Very odd.
Starship Troopers I always feel would make a great TTRPG. Probably not so
they
much a
actually
war game, but there was
they
one.
ha-
Hmm.
they do have a Starship Troopers game. It came out not too long ago, actually. I've been meaning to do a curious case on that, but there's some which is just like I want to ask myself, can I do it?
Yeah.
Like, can I make can you make a racing RPG? And not many people said you could, but I'm like, I think I've got it, and I based it off on the old Road Rash game, actually.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely doable. I know even Games Workshop tried to do a orc racing game at one
Yeah,
point recently, 2 years ago, I think.
it's
Um,
people say it's not possible, and I always say I'll see if I can do it,
mhm.
and that's where kind of like the commission stuff comes in because I do things at my own pace. Some projects take me about 2 weeks to kind of get into a playable state. Others take me like almost a month.
Mhm.
And if someone wants it, like I want this now, I'm like, all right, pay up. I'll write it for you. There's one project called Dungeon Tactics. I actually worked with a company called Stormforge. Stormforge Productions. The main guy contacted me and being like, hey, you want to make this game with me? I'm like, all right, yeah. I wrote the game. It's done. He's doing the back end stuff to make it pretty. I wrote the rules and stuff. And hopefully that actually goes to Kickstarter soon.
Oh wow.
Well, I'm getting the big leagues soon, TM, but it's been soon for like 3 months. Don't worry. But the commission is mostly to give me an idea what people want,
Yeah.
in addition to quickly doing it,
Yeah.
or people do it to torture me. That is a very likely thing, such as Dying of Dryads, which my friend paid me money to make, which is based off of a game called Song of Swords. But he wanted it to be entirely a narrative game about relationships and a game about HEMA combat using the same mechanics.
Okay.
That was painful.
Hang on. Relationships. So you build a game around relation. When you say building a game around relationships, I'm thinking,
You know,
those Japanese dating simulators.
to a degree,
Right.
that
Okay.
is.
I'm
It
on.
was also using a game based around its sword combat,
Hmm.
and I had to use that system for it. It was the most painful experience of my life, but it's done. It's available. You can play it if you feel like. Uh, he paid me money to do that,
Hmm.
but that's usually what those are there for. What that
Yeah.
commission is there. It's like you want something done, and you want something done now in your
And
exact specific way. Let me help you.
once you create a system, you're very big on sending that out to the world and making it available as well, aren't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's kind of a twofold thing. One is I like it when people play games. I like people getting people into this hobby. I like people introducing people to new things of like, hey, you want to do this, play this. Hey, you want to play this cool game, play it, do
Hmm.
it. I also am terrified of playtesting my own stuff because I see things differently than other people would.
Mhm.
Just because I wrote it and be like, it's wrong, and I'll delete everything and burn it all to the ground.
Yeah. I'm a software developer in real life, so one thing
Yeah,
I've learned is you have to, yeah, don't test your own stuff.
you get it. You get it.
Yeah.
Like it. I've actually got some really good feedback from people. This is anonymous people will come into a thing being like, "This is broke, fix it," or like,
Mhm.
"Hey, I really like this. Can you expand on this?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Of course," because you took your time to write that comment, and you
Yeah.
may or may not called me something else. So don't worry, mwah, I love you, people.
Yeah, yeah. So my last question is, how would for people wanting to get inspired by TTRPGs and RPGs, what advice would you have for them?
If you're first getting into the sphere, if you're first like, I want to play TRPGs for the first time, I never knew. It's okay to be new.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people get frightened
Yeah,
by that. It's
it's intimidating.
like, oh no, I have to learn all like 800 rules. Oh no, I have to memorize no. It's okay to not be an expert at something right away, especially when it's a game about playing, elf games. Like it's okay. You don't need to know everything. And the guy running the game, even if you're running the game, they're in the same boat. Not everyone knows everything. And
Yeah.
it's a game, it's a hobby about a conversation. It's just like this, except I'm pretending to be a barbarian and somebody else is pretending to be a goblin that I'm going to smash with a hammer. Because ooga booga, I have berserk.
Hmm.
It's one of the things of getting into more of the writing side of things is read everything you find, look at odd things, write what you want to write. Don't write things that are like, I want to make the game that will make the monies.
Hmm.
Don't do that
Yeah.
because there's no money in this industry. uh, if you like D&D supplements, yeah,
Yeah.
like don't. I won't say anything about that. Like you could probably do something, but if you don't feel passionate about it, it's not going to be fun for you. It's not going to be fun for anyone playing it. My last big thing for everybody is there are more games than D&D out there. There
Yeah.
are more games than the popular ones. Just because a game is popular doesn't necessarily mean that it's like this end all be all of design. And to everyone else, it's okay to like D&D. It's okay to enjoy popular things.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know a lot of developers have a bad indie devs being like, D&D is the worst game ever created and I hate it. And here's my giant list why. It's like,
Because it's taking all the money away from you.
yeah, it's like, it's
Yeah.
okay to enjoy something. As long as you are having fun and you can buy into the experience, the fun, TRPGs are kind of a one-of-a-kind hobby. It's
Hmm.
you get more options, you get more breadth of accessibility. You can do whatever you really want with it. It's not like a video game where it's, well, here's level 1. When you beat level 1, you go to level 2 or something similar.
Yeah.
Talking about,
It's not
We were
linear.
talking about RimWorld earlier, but like
Yeah.
there are constraints to any of those things. It's not like reading a book where it's like, well, I've finished the book, the story is over. TRPGs allow you to experiment of be the protagonist a little bit more rather than play someone else's story.
Hmm.
Embrace that and have fun. And just know you're having fun with everybody else. If you kind of like, I need to be the main character, there's actually a lot of games which are solo RPGs you could play, which explicitly help you with that.
Yeah.
But that's all I can really say is have fun, enjoy what you're doing, because this industry, this hobby is all about that and trying to make sure that you have as much fun as possible.
But thank you ever so much for spending time with us and telling us about your journey.
All right, thank you for having me on. You can find me if you Google me.
Yes,
Just follow
yes,
me on.
I'll be putting some links in the description below. I'll be putting your Twitter handle as well, and anything else you just send along to me, and I'll put it in the descriptions.
All right, cool, perfect. Well, thank you.
Thank you.